Hello everybody, how's it going? Before we begin, I just want to be very clear about something. This is fan-made. This is a fan-made adaptation of the Walking Dead series. All original characters like Lee, Kenny, Clementine, and others belong to Telltale Games and Skybound. This project is non-profit, made purely out of the love I have for the game. What you're about to watch is my own long-form storytelling of it, expanded into a TV-style format. I'm keeping the core story and emotional beats intact. I'll also be introducing new characters that I created, with every character having their own story arc. This is something I'm building as a long-term project. I have 12 seasons worth of information. 12 seasons. That's enough to keep you guys interested, I hope. And I'll be uploading consistently as the story grows. And the story does grow. Like, for instance, just saying, for example, this season 1 of the game was only 5 episodes. I extended it to 15 episodes. And season 2, that whole storyline can stretch across like 3 seasons, I think. If you're a fan of Telltale, or if you just love deep character-driven survival stories, you're welcome to stay here, hang out, enjoy yourself, grab a snack, get ready to enjoy this story. And if you enjoy this episode, feel free to leave a comment or theory. Before we get into it, I will say I like criticism. It helps me learn and it helps me do things differently for your guys' enjoyment and for mine, because failure is the best teacher in my opinion. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. Alright guys, this is Act 1, The Road to Nowhere. The episode opens exactly how fans of The Walking Dead remember it. A quiet Georgia highway, Interstate 85. It's the middle of the day and the sun is beating down hard, but the road is empty. No traffic, no noise. Just heat shimmering off the asphalt and miles of nothing ahead. Something already feels wrong. In the back seat of a police cruiser sits Lee Everett, obviously Lee from the game. He's handcuffed. Sweat rolls down his temple. His eyes stay fixed on the window as pine trees blur past, one after another, like he's trying to outrun his own thoughts. Up front is Officer Mitchell, and he's doing what cops do when the silence gets uncomfortable, trying to fill it with small talk. He glances at Lee through the rearview mirror and casually says he doesn't seem like much of a talker. Lee doesn't even look at him. He just answers that there isn't much to say. Mitchell keeps pushing anyway. He brings up the crime. He says he heard Lee killed a guy, a state senator. Lee pauses for a moment before answering. Then he quietly says that's what they say. The officer presses again. Asks if the senator was doing something crazy, like, I don't know, sleeping with his wife or something. Lee's jaw tightens. He answers with just 2 words, plain and simple. Lee replies and says, he was. And after that, the car goes completely silent. No jokes, no music, no conversation. Just heavy tension hanging thick in the air. A few moments later, blue lights start flying past them in the opposite lane. There are other police cars heading towards Atlanta. Mitchell watches them pass and mutters that the whole damn force seems to be moving today. Something big must be happening, he says. And then the radio crackles. At first, it's just static, and then it's screaming. Fragments of voices breaking through, units being overran, calls for help, panic bleeding through every word. Lee finally looks up and asks what that was about. Mitchell just shrugs it off, says it's probably just another protest or something, and ain't nothing new. And that's when everything goes wrong. Something slams violently into the police cruiser. The steering wheel jerks violently, and Officer Mitchell screams. A figure stumbles in the road. There's no time to react. Glass explodes all over Lee's face, cutting him up. The cruiser veers off the highway, flipping through brush and trees as the world spins out of control. And just like that, boom, the screen cuts to black. No, that's not the end of the episode. Relax. However, that is the end of Chapter 1. And before we get any further in the story, Officer Mitchell was the officer that was with Sean in the game. But like I've mentioned before, this is a different universe, fan fiction, right? So in my universe, the cop driving Lee to jail is Officer Mitchell. Chapter 1 of the episode is meant to set the tone, to let you know, like, hey, anything can happen at any moment. And another thing I want to touch up on really, really quickly is, while I might be changing some things about the storyline, some things remain intact. Some deaths remain intact. Some relationships remain intact. It's all part of my fan fiction. If I think it was a good idea and I wrote it well in my universe after playing the game, then yeah, I'm going to use it. But anyways, guys, here's chapter 2. All right, guys, chapter 2 picks up in complete silence. Not a peaceful silence, but the wrong kind of silence. The only sound that you can hear right now is the buzzing of flies. Lee slowly comes to his senses, hanging upside down inside the wrecked police cruiser. His head is pounding. Blood runs down his forehead and into his eyes. He groans in pain, trying to move. And that's when he realizes his hands are still cuffed. The windshield is shattered. Glass is everywhere, stuck in his skin, stuck in his face, his arms. He looks forward in the front seat, and the windshield is just completely gone, and the officer lays like 5 feet in front of it. Officer Mitchell's neck is twisted at an unnatural angle. His body is slumped, face down, lifeless. Lee calls out to him anyway. Officer? Officer. No response. Lee's leg is hurt pretty bad. He's limping. He sees the keys are still attached to Officer Mitchell's belt. Lee limps over to him, breath ragged, fingers shaking as he reaches for them. He slips the key into the cuffs, and that's when the body twitches. Lee freezes. Before he can react, Mitchell suddenly growls, a wet, inhuman sound, like an animal. And then all of a sudden, Officer Mitchell lunges towards Lee, blood pouring from his mouth like a wild, rabid dog. Lee stumbles back in panic, scrambling through the dirt. His hand lands on a loose shotgun shell that fell out of the car. Nearby, half buried in the mud, is the officer's shotgun. Lee fumbles desperately, jamming the shell in, barely knowing what he's doing, and then he fires with no hesitation. The blast echoes through the trees. The body collapses, this time for good. Lee just stands there, staring at the smoking barrel, chest heaving, heart pounding out of his ribs. He feels a lot of guilt, not only because he shot the officer in his head, but because it reminds him of his past mistakes. After a long moment, he quietly mutters to the officer, "I'm sorry, officer." The woods fall silent again, but it doesn't feel safe. Lee looks around and notices something else now, a trail of blood leading away through the trees. He limps after it, following the trail, pushing through branches and brush, each step agonizing for him. And then the tree opens up. He steps out onto the quiet suburban street, 2-story houses, manicured lawns, white fences. A tricycle lies tipped over in the road. A sprinkler runs endlessly on an empty patch of grass. It looks as if life just stopped, like things were normal. Just disregarding the fact that the dead came back to life and started eating the living. But from what Lee sees right now, everything looks fine. Mowed lawns, sprinklers, like just normal people things. He walks down the neighborhood and weakly calls out, "Hello? Anybody home? I need help. Please." No answer. Then he hears something, a faint voice. But it's not outside. It comes from inside one of the houses. Boom! That is the end of chapter 2. We will continue chapter 3 here in a second. I feel like things are going pretty good so far. I hope so anyway, but I hope you guys are enjoying it. Let's start chapter 3. Chapter 3 starts with Lee walking through the suburban neighborhood. The sun is starting to set, bleeding a deep red light across the yards of the empty neighborhood houses. This is the kind of place that used to smell like barbecue, smoke, and freshly cut grass. Now it smells like rust, blood, and decay. Lee moves slowly down the street, every step sending pain through his injured leg. Somewhere nearby, a door creaks in the wind. Flies buzz lazily in the air. Lee calls out, his voice weak but desperate, asking if anybody's there, but no one answers. He steps over a tipped-over mailbox, sweat soaking through his shirt. As he moves forward, he hears something strange. A scratching sound, like 2 rocks rubbing together on a piece of concrete. Lee follows the sound, rounding the corner of a driveway, and then he freezes, and what he sees next is completely horrifying. Lying in the middle of the concrete is the body of a young girl. She can't be more than 9 years old. Her body has been torn apart, ribs split open like broken wood. A small doll lies beside her hand, discarded and forgotten. Lee's breath catches in his throat. He stumbles backward, horror washing over his face. He bends forward, hands on his knees, fighting the urge to vomit. Quietly, almost to himself, he mutters, "Oh my God, Jesus." After a moment, he forces himself to move again. He looks up at the surrounding houses. Curtains are drawn tight, bloody handprints smear all across the doors and the windows. This was a good neighborhood. Families lived here, kids played in these exact yards. Now it's nothing but echoes and ghosts. At the end of the street stands a single two-story house. Lee notices the mailbox as he approaches. He stops for a second, examining the house before entering. Lee limps up the porch and knocks on the door. Nothing. He peers through the window and sees the inside has been torn apart. Furniture's overturned. A picture frame lies face down on the floor. He pushes the door open and steps inside. The air is thick and it's still. The only sound is a television blinking static in the corner of the room. A shattered mug lies on the floor. Then Lee notices the answering machine. It's blinking. 3 new messages. He presses play. A woman's voice comes first, gentle, worried. A woman's voice comes through first, gentle, worried. She calls someone Sweet Pea, more than likely in reference to a child, and says they're still in Savannah. She talks about something bad happening, about staying inside, about trying to get home. She was talking too fast. She was talking as if this was the last time she would try to contact her home. The message cuts off. The second one starts. A man's voice now, urgent, panic, demand, telling someone named Clementine to stay inside, to not open the door for anybody, and then screaming, and then a crash, and then static. Lee closes his eyes as the weight of it hits him all at once, and then out of nowhere, a crackle. A voice comes through a radio somewhere in the house, a small voice. Lee looks around and finds the radio laying on a coffee table in the living room. He picks it up and says, "Hello?" The voice on the other end says, "Daddy, is that you? Mommy?" Lee says, "Who is this?" The little girl tells Lee her name. Her name is Clementine. Old Clamato is in the building, guys. Old Clamato is back, ready to sauce up your television screen. Anyways, Lee freezes in place as he knows that's the little girl that was being referenced on the answering machine. Clementine asks if he's a monster. Lee says no, he just needs help. He asks if Clementine is somewhere safe. Clementine says, "Yes, I'm in my treehouse. I can see you. Can you see me?" I look through the kitchen window. Lee looks through the kitchen window and sees Clementine peering out of her treehouse with dirt smudged on her face and streaks of where tears fell down. Lee comes outside with his hands raised, telling Clementine she has nothing to be afraid of. Lee asks if Clementine's parents are here, and Clem says no, they went to Savannah, and they left me here with my babysitter, Sandra. Lee excels sharply and tells Clem that her parents will be home soon, and until then, they should stick together. They climb into Clementine's treehouse together and kind of get to know each other a little bit. They talk about a plan. They say they're going to leave at first light. Later that night, the two of them sit together in the treehouse. A small lantern flickers between them. Crickets hum down below. Wrapped in a blanket, Clementine leans against Lee and asks the question she's been holding in. She asks Lee if he thinks her parents are okay. Lee pauses for a long moment, and then he says he hopes they are. Lee bumps his elbow on the hard wooden floor and says, "Shit." Clementine says, "Swear," and Lee apologizes. Eventually, Clementine falls asleep on Lee's shoulder. As Lee sits there in the quiet, he stares out the window of the treehouse into the dark woods down below. The guilt he's been carrying since before the crash weighs heavier than ever. Not just the guilt of him killing a man, but the guilt of knowing this little girl has no one to protect her, and he can't just leave her there. We get a flashback to Lee before the apocalypse, before anything went wrong in his life. Sitting across from him at the dinner table is his wife, Linda. Lee says they should try to have a child, but Linda says no, they can't even keep their relationship together, much less bring life into this world. Lee says maybe a child is what they need, but Linda is clearly not interested in this. She tells Lee to fix himself before trying to engage in having a child. We flash back to current day. Lee wipes a singular tear from his face, pretending everything's okay, but he thinks about his wife and the life before every single damn day. He looks down at Clementine and just stares at her peacefully. Then he lays his head back and goes to sleep. Boom! That is the end of chapter 3. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So the purpose of this chapter was not only to introduce Clementine, but also to introduce the fact that Lee has always wanted a kid. That's important. Obviously, he can just continue his journey, maybe go look for his family, but he can't now. Not because he's injured, but because he can't leave Clementine there. He pieced it together in his head that Clementine's parents are dead. Well, let's see what happens in chapter 4. Chapter 4 opens up the next morning. The sun slowly crawls over the rooftops, burning away the mist that settled over the neighborhood that night. For the first time since the crash, the world feels calm. Lee and Clementine walk side by side through the quiet streets, careful and cautious with every step. No cars, no people, not even a walker. Just the wind and the distant lonely moan of a walker somewhere far off. Clementine grips her walkie-talkie tightly in both hands. She tells Lee her mother has another one. She hands Lee a second one she has and says, just in case they ever get separated from each other. Lee takes it. Lee has a hammer tucked into his belt from the night before, the only thing he could find to defend himself if necessary. Clementine finally breaks the silence. She asks Lee if things will ever go back to normal. Lee doesn't answer right away. He just tells her the truth. He tells Clementine he doesn't know. He hopes they do. She says she misses her mom and dad. Lee pauses. Then he admits he misses his parents too. They keep walking, turning a corner into another stretch of devastation. Abandoned bikes, spilled trash cans, dried blood smeared across the sidewalk. Lee says it used to be a nice neighborhood. Clementine points to one of the houses nearby and says her friend Izzy used to live there, and her dad would make pancakes every Saturday. Lee faintly smiles and says, that sounds pretty nice, actually. After a moment, Clementine asks Lee what he did before all of this. Lee doesn't want to answer, but he tells her that he was a history professor. Civil War stuff mostly. That's what he was mostly interested in. He said it didn't pay much, but he liked helping people learn. They walk a little farther in silence. Then Clementine asks the question that Lee's been dreading. She tells Lee she saw him in that cop car when it crashed, and asks Lee why he was in there. Lee's face goes blank. Finally, he tells Clementine he made a mistake. A big one. Clementine tells him it's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. She made a mistake once and lied to her parents. Lee quietly answers and says, that's not a big mistake, Clem, but I'm glad you think that way. A little later, they come across a small red sedan half up on the curb. The door is wide open, the engine is dead. Blood streaks the side of the car, smudging all over the windshield. Lee tells Clementine to hang back while he checks it out. She stands by the stop sign on the street. Lee leans into the glove box and finds a Glock, still half loaded. Someone didn't make it very far. Lee pockets the gun and tries the ignition, just nothing but tick sounds. Lee knows the battery's shot. Clementine tells him he shouldn't take that gun. Lee agrees, but says if they run into trouble, he'd rather have it than not have it. He catches his reflection in the side mirror, blood smear all over his face and his leg, exhausted, hollow. And just like that, the guilt comes rushing back. We flash back to years earlier. There's going to be a lot of flashbacks, by the way, guys. It builds character development. Lee stands behind the counter of his family's drugstore in Macon with his little brother Brandon. Their father moves slowly through the aisles, an older man, Mr. Everett, cane tapping against the floor. A jittery man comes in, obviously on some kind of drug. He grabs some cough syrup and just throws random shit in the duffel bag and tries to leave without paying. Before Lee can react, his father steps in and cracks the man over the shoulder with his cane. The thief drops the bag and runs off. Lee is shocked. He tells his dad he could have broken that guy's arm. Their father tells them both something they will never forget. His father tells them to protect what's yours, but to never lose your head while you're doing it. Lee snaps back to present. Clementine is staring at him, worried, and asks Lee if he's okay. He tells Clementine that he's fine, he's just thinking about his family. That's when they're interrupted by a scream that echoes down the block. Clementine points to someone, just three silhouettes, surrounded by walkers, and says they need help. They run towards the noise and find a pickup truck, trapped against a fire hydrant. A man swings a crowbar wildly while a woman pulls her son close, sheltering him from the chaos. Walkers closing in from every side. This man is named Kenny, y'all. Kenny is here. Kenny is here. This man is Kenny. And the woman, his wife Katja. And the son, of course, it's Duck. Little goofy ass. Clementine tugs on Lee's sleeve, begging him to help. Lee tells Clementine to hide behind the bushes. He raises the Glock and fires. One walker drops, another one stumbles, and Kenny takes the opening and crushes the last walker's skull with the crowbar. Out of breath, Kenny shouts that Lee is one hell of a shot. Lee grabs Clementine's hand and together they run. The group bursts into the nearest house and slam the door behind them. Inside, everyone catches their breath. Duck clings to Katja, shaking. Clementine stays close to Lee. Kenny introduces himself and his family, his wife Katja and their son Duck. Lee introduces himself and Clementine. Kenny admits that he thought he was dead out there. Lee says they just got lucky. Katja asks if Lee and his daughter were alone, and Lee tells her that Clementine's not his daughter. He is just looking out for her until they find her parents. Kenny looks around the boarded up house and admits that it isn't the safest place to stay put. He says they have to find gas and maybe they can stick together. Lee tells Kenny that he and Clementine are heading to Savannah. And Kenny says it's hell of a coincidence considering his boat's in Savannah and that's where they're heading. Clementine tugs at Lee's hand and gives Lee a small nod. Lee agrees and shakes Kenny's hand. Clementine leans in and whispers that they seem nice. Lee quietly agrees. They're good people. They're the good kind of people. The camera pulls back through the broken window, the small group silhouetted against the fading light. For the first time since everything fell apart, Lee is not alone anymore. That's the end of Chapter 4, guys. Chapter 5 is coming right now. Stay put. Chapter 5 slows things down a bit. After everything that's happened, the world finally goes quiet. Inside the abandoned house, a single oil lamp flickers, throwing long shadows across the walls. Outside, the street is dead, figuratively and literally, as walkers are scattered through the neighborhood. Clementine sits on the floor with Duck, rolling an old toy truck back and forth between them. Katja watches them from the couch, knitting slowly with the half-unraveled ball of yarn she had found earlier. Lee stands by a boarded-up window, staring out into the dark street. Kenny joins him, rubbing the back of his head, letting out a tired sigh. He mutters that it's not much of a night for sleeping, not much of a world for it anymore either. The two men talk quietly. Kenny mentions that Lee said he's from Macon, right? Lee says he was born and raised, and that his family ran a pharmacy downtown. This catches Kenny's attention. He explains that before everything fell apart, they heard about a quarantine zone near Macon. Military ran, fences, soldiers, safety, at least in theory. Lee isn't convinced. Kenny admits he doesn't know if it's real, but if there's even a chance, he has to try. He looks over at Duck, laughing softly with Clementine, and says that Duck is all he's got left. Well, Katja, but Duck is the only sense of innocence left in this world. Lee understands. He says Clementine isn't his, but she reminds him of why fighting still matters in this world. The two of them make a decision. At first light, they'll head for Macon, see if any quarantine zones there, and then they're going to continue their trip to Savannah if things go south. There's just one problem. The group needs gas. Kenny points out that the truck won't make it that far on fumes. Lee mentions that he saw a few cars down the block. They could siphon some while it's quiet, Katya isn't thrilled about the idea. She says it's dangerous in the dark, but she eventually agrees because they do need the gasoline. She keeps the kids inside while the men go out and look through the neighborhood. The neighborhood feels wrong. The street is completely silent and still. A lone streetlight flickers in the distance. Lee and Kenny move carefully between abandoned cars, flashlights wrapped around in cloth to dim the light. They whisper as they work, siphoning gas from the SUV. Kenny jokes that he used to do this back when gas prices were ridiculous, even siphoning from his own truck just to mow the lawn. Lee laughs quietly. They talk more as they work. Kenny calls himself a family man and says there's not much else to be proud of in this world, even before the dead were walking. Lee admits he used to think the same way. He thought his career and money is all that mattered. That's before all of this. He tells Kenny that before all of this, he was a history professor. Kenny cracks a joke about walkers learning Civil War. They share a tired laugh together. Then Lee gets serious. He admits he hurt someone he loved and cared deeply about, and made choices he can't undo. Kenny tells him that nobody's clean anymore, not in this world, not in the world before, and that he has Clementine looking up to him now, so that means he's doing something right. And Kenny says, speaking of Clementine, do you know what you're doing? Do you need help? Lee says he's got it under control for the most part. They finish filling the canisters. A low groan echoes from somewhere behind a car lot. That's their cue. They head back. Inside the house, Katya hums softly as she tends to a pot over a candle flame. Clementine and Duck are asleep now, curled up together in a makeshift blanket fort. Lee and Kenny quietly set the gas cans down. Katya is relieved to see them. Lee looks at the kids, his expression softening. Kenny sits beside Katya and takes her hand. Lee leans against the wall, staring out through the cracked window at the night sky. Somewhere, not that far away, walkers growl. They're hungry. Lee closes his eyes and quietly hopes that the quarantine zone is real, not just for his sake, but for Clementine's sake. The oil lamp flickers and finally goes dark. That concludes chapter 5. We have chapter 6 and chapter 7, guys, and then we're done. And yeah, I'll see you guys there. Chapter 6 opens up with the group back on the road. Kenny's pickup truck rumbles down a cracked Georgia highway, the sound echoing through the trees. Kenny's pickup rumbles down a cracked Georgia highway, the sound echoing through the trees. Woods stretch endlessly on both sides. Quiet. Still. It feels wrong. Inside the truck, Lee rides shotgun, one hand resting on the dashboard. In the back seat, Clementine sits between Katya and Duck, clutching her walkie-talkie tightly, like it's the only thing anchoring her to the world before all of this. The early morning sunlight washes over them, painting everything gold as the truck bumps along. Kenny breaks the silence, saying they've got 2 more tanks of gas. That should get them to Macon. And after that, who the hell knows? They'll have to find more gas eventually to make it to the savannah. Duck leans forward between the seats, eyes wide with curiosity, and asks if there's really going to be soldiers there. Kenny tells him that's what folks have been saying, so more than likely, yeah. Duck presses further, asking if they've got tanks and guns and grenades. Kenny smiles and says, maybe, Duck, maybe. Clementine doesn't join in. She stares out the window, watching burned down fields and overturned cars slide past, her reflection faint in the glass. After a moment, she quietly asks Lee if her parents are going to be there. And Lee says he hopes so, and if they're not, they're going to find them regardless. He makes that promise to her. She nods, clutching her walkie-talkie tighter. Kenny glances over at Lee and asks if he's been to Macon lately. Lee says not since everything went to hell. His family's place is right downtown. Kenny says good, maybe you'll get to see them. Maybe it'll be good for you seeing Macon again. Lee doesn't answer. He just looks out the window, lost in thought. Not long after, the trees begin to thin out. And then they see it. Barbed wire fences rise out of the haze ahead. Guard towers loom over the road. A huge hand-painted sign reads, Federal Emergency Quarantine Zone. As the truck rolls up, soldiers in stained uniforms raise their rifles. One of them shouts for Kenny to turn off the engine and keep their hands visible at all times. Kenny kills the ignition, and everybody in the truck raises their hands, even Duck and Clementine. Katja instinctively pulls Duck closer to her, while Clementine grips Lee's hand. 2 soldiers approach with rifles, face hidden behind scarves that has dirt stained all over it. Sergeant King, asks them if any of them has been bitten, scratched, or running a fever. Lee says everybody's clean. King tells his partner to scan them anyway. The device passes over every single square inch of their body. Nothing. King tells them that they're clear and waves them through, warning them not to wander past the perimeter fence and to report immediately if anyone gets sick. Inside the quarantine zone, it's chaos. Rows of tents stretch across muddy courtyards. Families huddle around barrels of burning trash. Guards shout orders as many people line up for rations. Kenny parks the truck among a line of other vehicles, and Katja whispers, "My God." Lee mutters that this isn't exactly the safe haven he pictured. Clementine looks around at the exhausted faces, coughing children, and soldiers pacing with rifles. And she asks Lee if they're going to be staying here, and Lee says, yeah, just for now. They are led to a tent that is marked Clear Zone, civilians. A medic checks them again, hands out paper bracelets. She says the quarters are tight, and they should stick to their assigned bunks and don't cross the green line after curfew. Kenny mutters something under his breath in his Florida accent, but you can tell it was something he probably shouldn't have said. That night, the group settles into barracks tents, lined with military-style bunk beds. A lantern flickers overhead. Clementine and Duck sleep on the bottom bunk under a single blanket. Katja quietly cleans a tin cup. Lee sits on the edge of his bunk, staring down at the bracelet on his wrist. Kenny sits across from him and says that it feels weird. And Lee asks what does. Kenny says being pinned up like cattle. Lee suggests that maybe the soldiers are just following the protocol and trying their best. Kenny scoffs and says their best got half the country killed. He lowers his voice. He admits that when it was just him and his family on the road, they passed many people that needed help, and he feels guilty after walking into a safe haven. He thanks Lee for helping him save his family again and tells Lee he didn't have to do that, but he chose to. Lee says he couldn't just walk away. Kenny tells him that he owes him one. They share a quiet moment of understanding together. From across the tent, Kasha softly reminds Kenny that tomorrow they should ask about food for the children. Kenny sighs and agrees. Clementine stirs in her sleep, rubbing her eyes, and calls out for Lee. Lee tells her that he's right here and she was just having a bad dream. She says in her dream that her parents were calling her name, but she couldn't find them anywhere. Lee gently tells her to go back to sleep and that she's safe, that he won't let nothing happen to her. She closes her eyes and drifts back into sleep. Lee stares up at the canvas ceiling as rain begins to patter softly outside. Outside the perimeter fence, rain drips down barbed wire. A soldier stands on patrol motionless, staring at walkers roam around outside the fence. And they appear to be moving closer, not too far away. That's the end of chapter 6, guys. We're on to the last chapter of this episode now. Chapter 7 takes place that same night. The rain hasn't stopped. It taps steadily against the canvas of the barracks tent, mixing with the soft hum of lanterns and distant groans beyond the fence. Everyone is asleep. Everyone except Lee. He tosses and turns on his bunk, sweat beading up on his forehead. His breathing grows shallow. His hands clench at nothing. And then we drift back into his past one final time before the outbreak, before walkers, and before meeting Clementine. Lee is driving through the Atlanta night, the city glowing around him. He's clean-shaven, wearing a tie, still the man he used to be. The radio plays softly, jazz, and then a sports segment, but Lee's not listening. He tells it to shut up and turns it off. Rains looks down the road. His wedding ring catches the street light as his phone buzzes. A message from his wife, Linda. She says we need to talk. Lee's jaw tightens. He takes the next exit. When he pulls into the driveway, something feels wrong immediately. The lights are on, and there's another car parked there, and it's not Linda's. Lee just sits there for a moment, staring at this car, rain dripping from the mirror, his hands shaking as he opens the door. Inside the house, music plays quietly, too intimate, too calm. He moves down the hallway and stops at the bedroom door, cracked just enough to hear voices, laughter, a man's voice, and then Linda's voice. She says something about Lee never understanding, and the man tells her that she deserves better. Lee pushes the door open and everything explodes. He shouts and asks what the fuck is going on. Linda screams at him and tells him to get out. And Lee says, "Get out, this is my house." The man, Paul, tries to calm things down, but Lee snaps. He tells him to get the fuck out of his house right now. Paul takes a step forward, and that's the mistake that will soon cost Paul his life. They fight, and it's not clean. It's not controlled. They crash into furniture. A lamp shatters. Linda is crying, screaming for them to stop. And in a moment of blind rage, Lee grabs a wine bottle and swings it over and over until Paul's body goes limp. He doesn't move anymore. The room goes silent. Lee stands there, breathing hard, staring at his hands covered in blood. Linda sobs in the corner. Lee whispers to himself, barely audible, "Oh God, what did I do?" Sirens wail somewhere in the distance, and then Lee wakes up. He wakes up and jerks his head upright violently, gasping for air, drenched in sweat. For a second, he doesn't know where he is. And then he sees Clementine sleeping nearby, peaceful, safe. "It's just a dream," he mutters to himself. "Just a damn dream." But his hands are still shaking. Lee can't sleep after that. He steps outside into the quarantine compound, pulling his jacket tight. The rain has stopped, leaving the ground muddy and heavy with the smell of fuel and wet earth. Floodlights buzz along the perimeter fence. A guard snores in a folding chair. Lee walks along the fence line, letting the cold air hit his head. And then he hears it, a metallic clang from behind one of the storage sheds. Lee freezes. He calls out, but no one answers. His hand slides to the Glock he found earlier. He tells himself it's probably nothing, probably just a raccoon. Then he hears movement, a grunting sound, a shape shifting in the shadows. Lee raises the gun, voice shaking, warning whoever it is to stop. And then a figure steps into the light, dirty, exhausted, but familiar. Lee breathes as he says his name. Brandon? It's his brother, guys, from the flashback previously at the drugstore. This is his little brother, Brandon, just a few years younger than Lee. His brother freezes, eyes widening in disbelief. They just stare at each other for a second, like neither one trusts what they're seeing. Then Lee lowers the gun. "Jesus Christ, you're alive, man." Brandon laughs through the tears and tells him he thought Lee was dead. They hug, awkward, desperate, like they're both afraid of this moment might disappear if they let go. Brandon explains he was still in Macon when everything went bad. He was at the hospital doing surgery on a patient. He tried to get there, but the roads were blocked and screaming was everywhere. Just chaos. He just ran until he found this camp. He tells Lee no one here really knows what's happening. Some people say it's just riots. Others say it's an airborne disease. Lee looks toward the trees beyond the fence, where faint groans drift through the dark. They're closer now. He tells Brandon he's seen them up close out there. Brandon asks if they're people, if they're just sick. And Lee says he doesn't know. All he knows is they don't stop. They don't stop until they tear you apart and eat you. They stand there quietly until Brandon mentions something their father used to say about keeping your head even when the world loses its mind. Lee almost smiles. Then a gunshot echoes from beyond the perimeter. Searchlights snap on, guards start shouting. Both brothers look towards the dark horizon where shapes move slowly between the trees. Lee says it quietly, but with certainty. It's going to get worse before it gets better. The camera lingers on his face, exhausted, hunted. The gunshot echoes again in his mind as the screen fades to black. End of episode 1. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It took me a lot of time to edit this and record this. I know some parts might not be perfect. This is also my first time doing something like this. It's been a pleasure reading this to you all. This is just episode 1, a new day. Episode 2 will be worked on here soon. It's called Quarantine. It basically just focuses on the group being forced It focuses on the group being forced to leave the quarantine shelter. We've seen a couple of new characters, like I mentioned. Things will be different from the game. Like Lee's brother, he's here. We know in the game he gets clapped before you even get to meet him. And we have Sergeant King, we met briefly. He's going to be a very major character. And then, yeah, I mean, the story's shaping up to be fine. I mean, if there's anything I can do to be better, let me know. I like succeeding, and I like making you guys happy, and I like enjoying doing this too. So, I'm not expecting to blow up from this. I don't care about the likes or the followers. I just do this for the passion. I enjoy writing, I enjoy reading, and I enjoy The Walking Dead. So, all of my favorite things are together. But I would appreciate it if you would leave a like and a comment. I want you to comment a few things. Comment your theories. Comment your favorite part of the episode. Just engage. If you engage with me, I will engage with you guys back. All right, without further ado, hope you guys have a good rest of your day or night. Take care. See you back with episode 2 of The Walking Dead.